Hey everybody. So I want to talk about what I'm calling the honeycombed earth today. I call it the honeycombed earth because that's just the image that I have in my mind when I try to think about or consider, feel into what the earth is like. Instead of that model of a solid ball with an iron core in the middle of it, I have a much different feeling for how the earth might be. And I think it's connected to so many things that we're dealing with right now. So I thought we could talk about that. So again, this is not something to believe. I'm not telling anybody that they should believe anything. But this is more something to feel into. And as always, I want to encourage us to just open our space, our inner spaciousness up more so that we can consider and hold different ideas within that space, even contradictory ideas within that space, and not have to reach any conclusions or hang on to any belief systems, whether they're old or new. Okay? Because in order to develop our discernment, I think we're going to have to get much more spacious, inwardly spacious, to be able to hold all of these different possibilities in that space for consideration without getting triggered, without feeling overwhelmed, without feeling like we have to make a decision about anything. I think it's going to help us develop our inner discernment. Okay? And I'm not just talking about your mind space. I'm talking about like the whole sense of your beingness as a vast spaciousness that is, way beyond this body and way beyond your mind. It's sort of inside your heart somewhere, inside your inner knowing. That's what we want to develop. That's who we are innately. We have that innately. So it's really just coming back to it, I think. What if the earth is not a solid ball of rock hurtling around in space, but something far more alive and complex and multidimensional and inhabited than we've ever imagined or been told? And what if the stories that we were told about inner worlds and underground civilizations and places like Shambhala and Inner Earth and beings who live inside the earth and beings who live within the seas are not fantasy or imagination, but just fragments of something that we've forgotten? Because I consider that all of this stuff that is coming back to us now is not new information. It may feel new because we haven't allowed ourselves to consciously consider it, but it's more like remembered things coming back into our awareness as the veil thins and drops. So, look, we can already state with certainty that there are great limits to what we've been told. Okay, whether it's about our planet's geology, geography, history, we know that, for example, we've explored only the tiniest part of the oceans. Hello. We know that much of the Earth's interior is inferred. It's just inferred. It's not necessarily directly experienced. And we know that, our knowledge is always partial and evolving, right? We are in a constant state of evolving knowledge, or we should be, right? The science is not settled. There's just so much about this planet that we don't know. And yet we've been given very definitive narratives about what the earth is and what it isn't. So I want to just explore that today. this idea of a honeycombed earth, right? Again, that's just my term. Maybe other people refer to that image as well. I don't know, but this is what it comes to me. Across cultures, across time, there have been always stories of the earth containing vast inner spaces like tunnels and caverns and subterranean realms and even civilizations, right? I mean, there are all kinds of ancient myths of underworlds. There are cave systems that extend far beyond mapping. There are all kinds of indigenous cosmologies of inner earth realms. So, whether you consider these to be literal or symbolic or both, what's interesting is how consistent that theme is and how long it has persisted. So, what if it's not, there's this idea of hollow earth. What if it's not hollow in that simplistic sense, like just a big space inside it, but what if it is honeycombed, right? It is full of spaces and movement and life within. Then there's the oceans. We know that the oceans are in the vast majority unexplored. We know that the deepest depths that we have explored contain very strange bioluminescent life forms that are fantastical, to say the least. We know that there are deep sea ecosystems that don't operate by the same rules as life on the surface. We often look to space for the unknown, looking out into outer space. But some of the greatest mysteries may be right here, underneath our feet and in the oceans. And that's a perfect metaphor, right? And instead of always looking out, we have the same information within. As without, so within, right? So if we want to know more about what's going on out there, we have to deeply anchor ourselves within, in the heart consciousness. We have to allow ourselves to explore inner space. And I think maybe as a collective, we're starting to become aware of inner space in a new way. Or maybe not in a new way, but in a kind of remembrance way. Oh yeah, maybe the earth is not what we were taught it is. Great example of that, it comes up a lot these days, is Antarctica. And, for me, that's like, it never mind what it may in actuality be, which is fascinating, and books have been written on this topic, but, it's like the edge of the unknown in consciousness too, in our awareness. That's why it's so tantalizing. We know, okay, so what do we know about Antarctica? What is acknowledged about Antarctica is that it's this vast, largely uninhabited, freezing cold continent covered in ice. It's restricted, it's difficult to access. There are just basically more questions than answers there. And we know that it's the coldest, the driest, the windiest continent, that it holds the majority of the planet's freshwater ice, that it's governed by an international treaty, interestingly enough, and that access to it is extremely limited and controlled. So that we know. Few people have ever set foot there, and those that have, even fewer are they who have explored beyond designated zones, let's say. And because of that, Antarctica has been kind of a mirror for our curiosity and our growing doubts about the versions of history and geography and geology that we've been taught. There are old maps of that region that appear to show land beneath the ice, that appear to show entrances to inner earth tunnels. There are many ancient references to southern lands. There are a lot of modern discussions now happening about Antarctica and theories about it, and what happened to the Nazis after World War II. And references to different alien races based in Antarctica or underneath Antarctica. So again, more questions than there are answers. I'm not here to tell you what is there. I'm just here to point to the fact that we don't fully know. There are a lot of questions. So, it's kind of like a place that represents the boundary between what we've been told and what remains unknown. And all of our questions about the mysteries on the planet, just starting to wake up to that. It's like becomes symbolic of the edge of our perception, the limits of accepted knowledge, the veil between what is seen and what is unseen, this occulted history, this occulted world that we're all curious about. So, just like with the idea of inner earth, the question isn't so much like what's hidden there, although I'm personally totally fascinated by that, and I feel a real sense of nostalgia for something there. The real question is, can we stay open and curious and grounded without needing to collapse the mystery into a belief because we need to feel like the mind needs to pin something down? Can we hold, again, that spaciousness and spirit of curiosity and questioning and critical thinking instead of needing certainty or becoming rigid? Can we open up our inner space? And I'm not just talking about Antarctica or inner earth or civilizations in the seas or ETs out there. I'm talking about everything, because this is going to be one of our most important tools, I guess, states to cultivate, because it's what allows us to develop our true inner heart-centered discernment, as opposed to trying to figure out what the hell is going on out there with all of this chaos and, news stories and different channels and podcasts. And you try to figure out what's going on based on all of that information, you're going to get lost because the intellect can't do it. Also because we're missing a ton of context. But that's not what I'm talking about today. My point is, all knowledge should be considered provisional, and if we don't have direct experience of something, it's even more provisional, right? We're just going on something we've heard, right? So we're living on a planet that is still largely unknown to us, and that alone can't be denied, and it should bring us into a deeper relationship with her of curiosity and reverence. And anyway, many traditions speak of other beings within the earth, within the waters, alongside us in ways that we don't fully perceive, and it seems like our awareness is expanding with regard to that, and that more contact is happening in that regard. I'm not asking you to believe this. I'm asking you to notice how often these stories appear, and just consider that reality may be more populated, more layered than we've been taught. And even in biology, we know that we share this planet with countless forms of life that we barely understand, right? And there is another question that naturally arises when we begin to consider that the earth is more complex and more layered, and possibly even inhabited within and within the oceans as well. And that is, if there are places of deeper access Entrances, points of connection, vortexes, portals, stargates. Well, where might they be? Well, I mean, that's I'm asking a question that many people, claim to have answers to. So this is not a new question by any means. But it's interesting to notice that certain regions of the earth seem to carry a disproportionate amount of tension and restriction or contention. And we might be well served by opening our awareness to what the relationship might be between these places and events on the geopolitical stage. I'm just saying. I'm just asking questions. We're still allowed to do that. These kind of areas like, remote polar regions or continents like Greenland or heavily militarized zones, military bases, areas with restricted access generally, regions that are surrounded by or the source of geopolitical complexity, places that are difficult to access, difficult to understand, surrounded by layers of control. Why is that? I'm not making a statement here. I'm asking questions. Just asking questions. Is it possible that some of these areas are significant energetically and therefore strategically and therefore politically? Maybe there's a lot more going on than we realize. Maybe there's a lot we haven't been told. Maybe there's a lot that some people know that they don't share. I think we need to look deeper and wider and vaster. If the earth has natural points of intensified connection to the inside of the earth, to the cosmos, then, what we might call gateways of different kinds, then it would make sense that those points might also be areas of interest, protection, and control. There's more going on out there than is superficially relayed. But here's what matters most. And I always bring it back here because at the end of the day, I'm not out there looking. I can't see directly. This is what I share is my intuitive feelings about things and, what I've learned from very reliable sources. But at the end of the day, it always comes back to us. The most important gateway is never going to be out there. It's always going to be this point within us where we can come back into coherence, where we can access directly knowledge, wisdom, the infinite field, where we can experience a much larger dimension of ourselves and come into presence and into relationship with the living field of intelligence that permeates all things. Because when we are here, present, fully grounded, fully connected and clear, we don't need to chase information out there. We don't even need to, go chasing portals or anything. And I know that there are people who do go and work with those portals and harmonize with those portals, and I'm not in any way belittling what they do. It's amazing what they do. Those people are necessary. They're here for a reason. They're working with those energetic spots. But, everything out there is within. If we want to know more about out there, we need to know more about within. So yeah, the real point of everything that I'm saying right now is about expanding our perception. It's not about proving inner earth or inner hidden civilizations. I think all of that will come into our awareness sooner or later. It's more about, just in terms of our own consciousness, like loosening the grip of certainty, and opening to a wider view and a deeper consideration of what might be also driving world events. And at the very least, when we allow the possibility that the earth is more alive, more inhabited, more mysterious, something opens in us, a kind of wonder and relationship to this planet and her intelligence. More humility, more curiosity, more reverence toward her and everything she holds for us within herself, yet to be rediscovered and remembered. She's alive. And last week we talked about her plasmic core and her magnetic field and the living systems and her relational intelligence with the sun and our relationship to the solar system and the cosmos. As much as we go out, then we have to come back in. So that's pretty much what I want to say today. It's not about deciding what's true. It's not about adopting new beliefs. If anything, it's time to transcend belief systems and open ourselves up to the kind of inner discernment that doesn't require, I guess I would call it claircognizance, gnosis, direct knowing. But in order to start experiencing that, we've got to have the ability to hold many contradictions within ourselves without freaking out or collapsing or getting overwhelmed or, having to have the mind come in and rigidly decide what something is. Know what I mean? Yeah. So what if we allowed that possibility, that reality is far more vast, far more populated, far more alive than anything we were ever told? And that is true within ourselves as well. It's not our role to figure it all out, but to become more present, more coherent, more connected to the living field that we're already part of. And, embrace these happenings on the world stage and beyond as an invitation to dive into our own inner depths and our own deep intelligence. The crazier things get out there, the more deeply grounded we need to be within our heart knowing. And the more we want to know about and understand out there, the deeper we've got to go within. Because ultimately they are the same. We can't experience anything out there that isn't already somehow a part of our inner being, an expression of our inner being, and what we have agreed to participate in on a soul level. Remember, everything is one. Even the dark is one with all that is. All right, for your consideration, a honeycombed earth populated with more life than we ever considered. Oceans populated with more life. Portals, stargates, places of intense connection all around the earth. held in contention as we speed towards a collective awakening where a lot of this stuff is going to come back to us. And it's all being fought over right now. Pretty amazing time to be alive. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you again next time.